you have Redfield, right? And you've had, you've had Anthony Fauci making a big deal out of all of this. But there's a brand new player that is come into the scene, finally, in the White House, that is starting to point out that the science is not standing up. And before we really get started, I want you to take a look at this, Jeffrey. This is a clear voice that has now been arguing with Redfield and Anthony Fauci on camera for the White House. This is Dr. Scott Atlas. Take a look at this.
Dr. Redfield today said that more than 90% of the population remains susceptible to coronavirus. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that Dr. Redfield misstated something there. And
so he misstated last time and
I'm going to answer your question if you let me finish. The data on susceptible that he was talking about was his surveillance data that showed that roughly 9% of the country has antibodies. But when you look at the CDC data state by state, much of that data is old. Some of it goes back to March or April before many of these states had the cases. That's point number one. Point number two is that the immunity to the infection is not solely determined by the percent of people who have antibodies. If you look at the research, and there's been about 24 papers at least on the immunity from T cells, that's a different type of immunity than antibodies. And without being boring, the reality is that according to the papers from Sweden, Singapore, and elsewhere, there is cross-immunity, highly likely, from other infections. And there is also T-cell immunity. And the combination of those makes the antibodies a small fraction of the people that have immunity. So the answer is no, it is not 90% of people that are susceptible to the infection.
So I guess my question is, I'm not a doctor, I defer to your expertise on this and to his, but so Americans hear one thing from the CDC director and another thing from you. Who are we to believe?
You're supposed to believe the science, and I'm telling you the science.
So he's not telling us science.
I'm telling you the science, and that's the answer. And if you want to look up all the data, you're free to. You can also talk to the following epidemiologists.
I guess why is he still going out before Congress and speaking if you say he's misstated today and the president said he misstated last time? Americans are looking for the best information right now.
Yeah, and I'm giving you the best information, and it's confirmed by people like Martin Kulldorff, who's a Harvard epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School. Let me finish, please. Jay Bhattacharya and Johnny Anides, both epidemiologists at Stanford. Professor Gupta, University of Oxford. These are people who know the latest data on the immunology and what's happening, and I just recited it to you.
Do you think, Jeffrey, we could get Scott Atlas to put on a mask and a vape pen and just do that for the press and say, why don't you ask Redfield about this? It's amazing, right? And this has been going back and forth all week. They're challenging Atlas and they're challenging Redfield, and they're all starting to argue about this. It's kind of like a debate in the making, and a debate I would say that America would actually like to watch versus the one we all stomached this week. What are your thoughts on Scott Atlas? I mean, finally, right, we've known he's been back there in the back office with Donald Trump, but now he's finally stepping in front of cameras. It was a pretty incredible week.
This is wonderful to see, because in order for him to be effective, he needed to get out there and just start blazing his guns. When he first got into the coronavirus task force for the White House, he was in the background. He really wasn't put out front. He didn't have much podium time, but now he's out there. Now he's fielding questions, and now he's, as you just saw by that clip, he's pushing back. And what's interesting is pretty much throughout this whole COVID pandemic response, whatever we're going to label it, the media has been really slow at all to criticize health experts, university elites, anybody coming out, the WHO. All of a sudden, Scott Atlas starts talking about the real science. And here's the headlines. Let's take a look at some of these. This is out of the Federalist. Media gunning for Scott Atlas because he keeps exposing coronavirus lies. Now, there's a pretty in-your-face headline. And then this is out of Newsweek. We have everything White House task force advisor who sided with Trump over masks says is false, CDC director tells colleague. So he's getting some enormous, he's not getting much help from the media with this, but it's wonderful to see him out there doing this.
It is, and you know what's troubling about when you listen to that, and this is what people really need to recognize, is that we're not looking at the science. As he said, you have the reporter saying, well, who am I supposed to believe, Dr. Atlas? Redfield's saying one thing, you're saying another thing. He said, the science, believe the science. you know, I'm only an expert referencing science. We're all just referencing things. And this was my beef when I was being interviewed by the New York Times, saying, you consider your job to simply take the word of Robert Redfield and say, there it is, mass work. No, ask to see the science. Ask to see what they're talking about. Vaccines are safe and effective. Really? Show me the science that proves that. Nobody's reading the science. And Dr. Atlas is saying, if you read the science, and not just the science I'm talking about, but that top university professionals from John Ioannidis all the way across the world, Oxford, everywhere you look, are writing articles. They're doing real studies, and yet no one in media wants to actually discuss the science. Again, if you look at the news, it's just, oh, look, we've got a Kim Kardashian battle going between world-renowned scientists right now. It's not about the battle. Why don't we make these people, you know, put forward their science? Let's have a real debate and really have the media actually read it. It's incredible what's going on, but thank God. Thank God we finally have a voice in the White House that is saying what the Highwire has been saying for the last 6 months. It was really a breath of fresh air, and he's been in a lot of news. He is standing his ground now, even though he's under attack by Dr. Fauci and Dr. Redfield. The science, I think, is going to back him up. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out now over the next couple of weeks, that people are having an opportunity to hear real science and the discussions outside of the narrative that was burned into us and pumped into us through our media by the WHO.